good evening. Thank you all for joining this conversation. I'm extremely excited as we know the topic that we'll be taking a deep dive into is when alignment dies somewhere between slide 5 and shift 2. And I would like to pick your collective intelligence, your brains, as leaders in your individual field, your take on this important, exciting topic when alignment is not to be found between strategy and execution. We'll start with you, sir, first.
Being Australia's trade commissioner in India and South Asia for about 2 decades, I think this is very, very pertinent to me because we do lots of strategies, right? Australia-India strategy or industry strategy or business strategies or country strategies, market strategies. And usually the people who do the strategies are the ones who are experts. In my view, a lot of them are armchair experts who analyze a lot of data, a lot of historical figures, a lot of trends and prepare a strategy. And obviously, the most important thing is the execution on the ground. And if somebody, say, has sat down in Australia and prepared a strategy on India based on all the inputs they received theoretically, there's also something called implementation, which is the most important thing. And that entirely depends on the ground realities, not just on the data or the analytics. It's about how do we implement a strategy, translate from theories to realities. I think that's where we usually find, not usually, I think almost every time we find a gap between what we envisage and what really happens on the ground. I think there are 2 gaps largely. One is the people who prepare these strategies do not necessarily have practical hands-on experience of doing things on the ground, right? They are academicians, they could be, experts, they could be, like I said, people who analyze a lot of data. But I think it's true for any market. But when it comes to India, perhaps it's even more true because here there's a lot of stuff that happens on the ground that doesn't get captured. One, the biggest challenge in India is getting the accurate data, right? Accurate practices. For example, somebody could say the import duty on a certain product in India is 50%. But when you actually try to implement that, you will realize that there are a lot of subcategories under that. So somebody who's made a strategy, who's made a business plan, who's made a sales case would be surprised. There are a lot of surprises on the ground. That's largely because people who made the strategies do not understand how difficult it's to implement. Second is also the translation, right? India is a very complex country and we have about 35 states. And despite the GST, there's still a lot of each state differs in its sort of culture and software. So you need to have the ground realities, ground understanding, practical experience of doing business on the ground, and not necessarily those people who write the strategy. So there's a big disconnect between people who write the strategies and the people who really implement the strategies. And that's where I think the gap is. In my view, I think it's important that, of course, all the data and analytics is very important, but you also involve people on the ground at the very early stage. And so that, there's no gap between what they intend to do and what happens on the ground. And you take any top consultants for that matter. I think most of those people are theoreticians, they're armchair experts. They do not have the experience of conducting business on the ground, dealing with, for example, the government authorities, approval authorities, the income tax authorities, the import customs. I think that's a big challenge. No theory can prepare you for that.
I think I actually agree with the factor that a lot of times, like, the planning is not done understanding the ground reality, right? That's where you always have the nuances which just get missed out. So you always talk about the high eagle level view, but you never talk about the granular conversations. So probably I can go a little more specific how we address it. So we do a lot of planning and a lot of ground execution. So all our businesses are on like a tier 3, tier 4 locations, and we have ground team which executes it. So every quarter there is a swapping what happens. The team who's on the leadership or the people on the HQ team would go to the field, spend weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, understanding every operations what's happening. And similarly, like the ground team would swap to the HQ every quarter, spend a week, spend 2 weeks, understanding all the initiatives, what is planned out. So that's where the conversation goes in, like, is this possible or not? So the people who are planning it out, they know the ground reality a lot more. They've spent a significant amount of time. And people who are on the ground come to the HQ and then they understand what type of initiatives are done and what is the objective of it. So a lot of times what happens is like we share a plan, but there's no objective which is shared. So people will execute it, but not understanding like why am I executing this? So I think this is something we have it within our company, which is working out much better. But I 100% agree with the point that planning without the ground reality is a disaster. So,
yeah. See, I think there are a lot of valid points in both the points. I would like to talk from an angle of any change management. See, strategy is about bringing out a change visualized by a set of people and making it happen on the ground through another set of people. The discontinuity creates a problem, number one. Number two, there is something called tribal knowledge, which is there with the execution team. And most of that is never there with the strategy team. The tribal knowledge is the one that makes it work. And that's not written, that's not spoken, that's only through people. It's not even understood. So without understanding the trenches, what's happening on the ground, when somebody creates something or pushes it, it's never going to fail. And complicated by the fact, like you said, India is a country where the language, the culture, and the way people behave only determines the success of any strategy. Whether it is a manufacturing strategy, whether it is a distribution strategy, whether it is a technology implementation strategy, it's all about the people who execute have to be part of this the strategy development process. But unfortunately, they are not. Many times you create strategies in the void without understanding the ground. That's common. I mean, that happens. But there are countries which have done it successfully. There are countries who have developed strategy at a macro level, but ensured that it is getting implemented at operational level, layer by layer by layer, consistently over a period of time. And they had the vision, they had the execution aligned. So this is the gap that we are complicated by communication, culture, language, and multiple dimensions that we have. So any strategy, I'm not saying it is not happening. We have done large strategies. For example, UPI is a great example of a strategy visualized, executed very well. How many such strategies have we done in India? There are many. There are a lot of things which have done well. But mainly our situation is where unless the people who actually want to use it get the buy-in, no strategy is going to work. So this is a gap that we need to address.
So there's always a say, right? 10% strategy, 90% execution. That's the color. Sometimes we spend too much on creating a beautiful deck, strategic deck, which paints a rosy picture, ballistic projections, without having the ground reality in place, right? So that's all of them I've touched upon. So I'm not going there, but rather, even if we have to start somewhere. Definitely, we can't take everybody's view, but at least there should be like top down, bottom up. Both needs to be taken into consideration. And there are 3 levels of view always they talk about: helicopter, tree, ground level. So in each level, how we can get the common alignment done and identify the low hanging things which could first be fixed in our strategy thing is a key, I would always say. And the feedback loop. So yeah, in a quarter, we are presenting a strategy for the next year. But how every month or every quarter we come back and see which worked, which have not worked. Why not? What is that next correction we are going to do so that in the next loop we arrive at. In the end of the day, you may be very surprised that when you start with something in the year end, when you review back, your strategy could have completely shifted. There is a possibility. But in the process, you would have learned something and you would have achieved something. Instead of that, if you're like, these are the 3 pillars, I have decided, let's go with it, no matter what, it's not going to.
So very valuable points, but a very different take on the strategy itself first. I think the worldview of strategy is changing in a very big manner. Gone are the days of long range planning and strategic planning, which 5-7 years plans and stuff like that, which was built on all that said was built onto that, saying that take a large view of data, analyze the data by market, by segment, by country, look at this, that, and plan out a beautiful deck and try and roll it out. And then you have a feedback loop, which is quarterly. Here is a dissonance. You got a strategy built for 7 years and you got to build it on a feedback loop of a quarter. Your strategy is never going to play out in a week. So I think the way to look at from the entire perspective is strategy formulation, which is an organizational challenge. Strategy implementation is a leadership challenge. When you form a strategy, you need to involve the entire organization in the right manner without getting the fact out of the way of saying that the strategic choices cannot be made by uh, democratically. Strategic choices are tough, cannot be a democratic process. It has to be finally made some choice. You've got to make a choice. Right or wrong is not the question. You've got to make a choice. Having made that choice, the leadership challenge is how does that get implementation done? And therein the question of alignment. And for me, the biggest thing in that alignment comes, you just cannot not communicate. You got to keep communication in entire every conversation, every act of yours is intrinsically tied up to the strategic choice you have made. One more critical point is that often we make strategic choices without getting into the fact of that what is my organizational either strength or weaknesses in real sense are. Having a false notion sometimes at very rightly said as higher, we are good at this. Do a thorough check. Are we really good at that? Or if these are the weaknesses, what is to be done for that? I think communication is one part, having a hard-nosed view, and I think it goes back to the leader. Yeah, you may call it leader or leadership team, whatever you want. It goes back to that particular team. How do you get it implementation done? And alignment is a big part of it, and communication and living it every day and flexing a bit. I'm not saying you if you have no, I mean, if you're going to go, we want to go to X direction, you go to 180 degrees, that's not right. But check, are you in the right direction? You may take a detour, you may do whatever, ground realities may come in, quote unquote, tariffs may come in the way of Mr. Trump's every day morning. Things can change, but you need to stay committed to that. And you have to give some time for that strategy to play out.
Great. So let me start with just reiterating what the title is. Okay. So the gap between slide 5 and shift 2. Okay. So if that is the case, I mean, for everybody's benefit, let me take the most popular, oft repeated goal of India being the developed nation by 2047. So strategy is all to realize a goal. Okay. So if you list down all this particular thing, what is that we have done? I mean, we are trying to do. I think there are very clear few points which are there, which has been articulated. One is, of course, the economy, that inclusion, the economic inclusion, formalizing economy, policy, infrastructure, critical technology, this particular thing, supply chain simplification. There are few things which are coming to my mind, which is well articulated. So how do, as a common citizen, how I am able to list down this particular thing to get that particular thing, because somebody have articulated that to the extent where I could comprehend that particular thing, and I could be able, I am able to reproduce it, and there is a connect being established with that particular thing. I mean, no way I am directly connected with any of those particular things, but as a countryman, I am able to connect with those things because somebody have articulated, so I think that example itself is a good reminder for us, for an organization, for doing that. But on the contrary, there is another aspect also is existing for a soldier. Do a soldier need to know the whole war strategy? I mean, the strategy would be made by some experienced general, but at the time when it comes to a soldier, it will be that number of kills, or maybe a number of or a area of kilometer or a point to be conquered. For him, that is what is translated and pieced down and appropriately delivered in packet in this particular way. For an organization, is also the same way. At various levels and layers of the organization, it need to be delivered in the right size packet for anybody to consume. And that's the way this gap between slide 5 and a shift 2 can be bridged.